Hello, everybody. Welcome back to HavoKast. Today, we are going to be ranking and discussing the main James Bond villains in all 25 of the official Eon series. They are a pivotal role, of course. There's a lot of iconic roles. There's a lot of great portrayals. And just something that I feel like deserves to be talked about. I have a project coming up with a point value associated with several main parts of each Bond film, and we're going to kind of like tally them up and see where they come in according to the point value ranking versus my just, off the cuff ranking from earlier this year. And it's kind of gave me the idea. Let's talk about the villains for a little bit. I think they're an important role in the movie, of course, franchise. I think they all kind of bring a little flair. There's been some recasts, some reimaginations within the movies, and I think, they just callbacks. There's good things that each movie has in the franchise, and I think it's worth noting for sure. But it's such a major part. I'd love to discuss it and just kind of talk about it and see what you guys think too. Who's your favorite villain? Who's your least favorite villain? What works? What doesn't? Absolutely would love to talk about that. Of course, we're just gonna go right off. I have this tier list here. I added a couple in here, and took a couple out that I didn't feel like needed to be involved. So this is just going to be like the main villains. There's 2 for Octopussy and 2 for the Living Daylights, but I think we'll come to discuss what that's all about when we get there. Anyway, the actual ranking I have is going to be like the perfect villain, just the one who is just, the acting is great. I think the usage is great. It fits with the script, plays off the other people in the movie, good chemistry with everybody, just the perfect all around. You can watch and watch and watch and never get sick of them. And again, this is all my opinion, so please, like I say, if you got a completely different opinion, definitely share it. I'd love to hear. No one's right or wrong on this. It's all subjective, of course. Great all around to me is kind of like a step below the perfect villain. Well, no kidding, but it's just kind of in my mind a very good portrayal. It might be it might be just a good villain without maybe the best chemistry, or maybe like they just don't fit exactly what I would assume that villain would look like or something, but just close enough. I mean, about as good as you can get without being just absolutely delightful every time they're on screen, if you can consider a villain delightful. But very, very good portrayal, of course. And then we just go down to good portrayal, which is kind of just right in the middle, almost kind of like a lower tier than middle, just because I think good portrayal is kind of the last of like the villains where I'm like, okay, I can totally watch these guys, I could totally believe them. Maybe not the most believable, but they have something going for them that's unique or interesting, and it's just not all there. It's still good acting or a good concept, but maybe not executed as fully as they could have. Missing something is clearly just, it could be a good portrayal, but it just doesn't fit, or maybe the actor wasn't right for the job or something, just something along those lines where it just doesn't seem right. And maybe it's just a complete miss on the part of the casting and director or anything like that. Maybe it's just the actor wasn't right for the part. Who knows? Either way, we'll get to it when we get to it, but missing something is kind of that category where, you feel like you can watch it and enjoy it, but it's not all there. Or it just doesn't really add too much to the story like some of the other villains do. And then does not work for me is just exactly that. Like, just, I don't even bother. It almost puts me off of the movie entirely, which, there's no Bond movie that I'm completely put off of, but I like a strong villain. I like the chemistry. I like the subtleties. I like the nuance and everything like that in their portrayal. And sometimes I just, it's just either too over the top and doesn't work, or it's just not enough, or it's boring, or, it's just not a believable villain at all. Like I said, we'll get to that kind of stuff later on, but I would like to just kind of go in order here too. So we're going to, like I say, just kind of fly off and see what we have here. But that's what I got going so far. We might change some of this up throughout, but you're just going to do just a basic ranking and discussion kind of thing. I wanted to talk about this so bad. I was like, I just want to get this out there, man. I love talking about Bond and like everything about it. And, a lot of these ranking videos, I'm more excited about just talking about them than I am anything else when it comes to the actual, the video itself. I just love discussing this kind of stuff. But anyway, I'm sorry I'm rambling. Let's just get on to it. Okay, so we're going to start with Dr. No. Now, Dr. No, for me, I feel it's a great all-around portrayal. And I know the big knock on Dr. No is he doesn't get enough screen time and this and that. I don't think he's going to be very high up in the great all-around portrayal, but I think as far as villains go, it's very, very creepy, very eerie, very kind of like overshadowing, it's a villain that's hidden. I think it's a menacing villain. I think the chemistry that he has with everybody in every scene is great. The dinner's awesome. When he's got his suit on, he's doing, the stuff in the radiation chamber or whatever, like, he's got all the people working for him. That's believable. It's incredible. He seems very in control of the situation, and people seem to be, just snapping to attention when he talks and stuff like that. Leading up when he was just the shadowy figure and all you did was hear his voice, and, the professor was just kind of quivering in his presence. It all works for me. I love it. I think it's great. And especially for the first movie, there was no formula yet. There was no idea other than the literature to kind of go off of. And I think he's very honest to the portrayal of the actual novel as well. And I just think that overall shadow menace, whatever you want to call it, I think it works very well for me. Works very well for Dr. No. I actually just recently watched this a few days ago too, and I was looking to be overly critical. I was looking to say, okay, well, a lot of people don't like that he's not in there enough, and I get it. I would love to see more of him, of course, but I think that thirst for more is kind of why I have him up there too. It's kind of like, hey, that's more of a script thing than it is your portrayal and your villain and everything, your character, your chemistry. And the fact that I want more kind of shows that, you're doing a great job. And I think just as a villain, it's perfect. I think it's great. So we're going to keep Dr. No up there. Rosa Klebb is next, and I think she's a good portrayal. I think Rosa Klebb kind of has a problem with the fact that she's the main kind of villain in this, but is overshadowed by the henchmen. And I mean, technically, Red Grant is a hired assassin. He's working for Spectre. He's working for Rosa Klebb. He's, contracted to kill Bond. So he technically is the henchman, even though he kind of overshadows everything she has. Now, she does a great job, but the problem with her is at the end of the movie, she just kind of turns into, the backup plan hired assassin to go essentially die for, Spectre. And when it comes to her role, she's just in the middle. You got Spectre, and you kind of see Spectre and the first look at, okay, Blofeld's behind the desk, another shadowy figure. We got Rosa Klebb, who is just there to further the plans and move orders. And she goes from like a very in control, powerful character to in the middle, you see this humanization of more, I'm actually afraid of this guy and everything else. And she's sweating and she's nervous and stuff. So it's a very good portrayal. I think she does a really good job. Her role in the movie, for me, just feels so diminished compared to everything else. And to be fair, the whole end of From Russia with Love, I don't really need. I think, after the train, you wrap it up there and everybody's happily ever after. I think all that extra after the train sequence was kind of unnecessary. I mean, I like it. It's good for the movie, but I just think at the end of the day, Rosa Klebb's role was kind of used up at that point. And they kind of shoehorned her into the rest of the movie that, in my opinion, like I said, didn't need to really be there. Still think it's a great movie overall. Still think her portrayal is good overall. I just don't like her. I don't like her villain. I don't like her character as much. I think she personally does a great job, but I don't think her villain, her character is that necessary. I think at the end of the day, you could have used anybody else that was in that movie to do what she did, essentially. I think the only thing that you really needed her for was that scene with Tatiana when she was giving the orders and kind of doing the whole double crossing. That was very important, and she was very useful for that. But I think after that, you just don't really need her as much as you need everybody else in the movie. And she kind of fades away until they throw her back in the fire at the end. So I don't know. I mean, I think that might, again, just be more of a script thing. Maybe I'm being a little too hard on her, but for me personally, I also just watched this one again, too, and I was just like, I forgot she even came back at the end, which, I mean, I guess what does that say about me as a fan? But, you know, it's just one of those things. We're going to move on to Goldfinger, and I'm going to put him above Dr. No. I think Goldfinger is a fantastic movie. I think he's a fantastic villain. I think the acting is great. And I think he does a really good job. The only thing is, actually, you know, I'm going to put him in the perfect villain category. I think I will. Because he was teetering between great and perfect. But I think I'm going to put him in perfect. Because as I'm thinking about him, as I'm talking about him, the only thing I don't feel is, you know, keeping him from perfect is I just don't think he's as menacing a physical threat as some of the other people that will be in perfect villain. But I think the organization he runs, I think he's kind of grounded more in reality than a lot of these other villains, which in my opinion is good. I think more grounded in reality helps a little bit. I mean, he is a pretty physical threat, but it's hard to believe that without a gun, he would be any kind of threat to a James Bond, especially the way Sean Connery was looking in Goldfinger. But I will say, you know, like, the acting's great. The fact that they had, you know, I mean, Gert Frobe wasn't even speaking English, you know, he was mocking and, like, you know, miming words, and they dubbed him, so, you know, he had to do a whole lot there. It's just, it was incredible what he did behind the scenes, as well as his character is just iconic and excellent. I think, overall, I mean, he really is just about as good as you can get when it comes to iconography, which is good because, you know, a lot of times you see iconic roles from movies in the past and you think, oh, well, that's iconic, so it must be a great portrayal. And it might not really be, you know, actually a great villain or a great portrayal of the villain or great acting or whatever, but he really breaks that mold. I mean, he can be iconic and still just absolutely do a great job with that role. What do we got next? So we got Largo, and man, Largo just missing something for me. I am not a fan of him. I actually loved the movie Thunderball. It was one of my favorites for a while. When I first started really getting into the franchise, I loved the way it looked. I didn't think it was very slow when I first saw it. I know, like, rewatching it can kind of drag a little bit, but I think that's just more of either a very, very casual fan or more of, like, people who are really deep diving into the franchise that find it slower because you notice those things more. Or if you're a very, very casual fan, you know, you might want to just kind of get to the action. But I mean, obviously there's exceptions and things like that. But for me personally, I like the movie. I don't mind the pacing as much. The underwater doesn't bother me too much. And I think Largo's involvement in the movie is good. I think he has a lot of roles. I think he's another guy that just gets kind of overshadowed by, Fiona Volpe and the henchmen in general. He's got not a ton of personality. He's very menacing. He's very threatening when it comes to who he has around him. But as far as just his presence, I don't think he's that threatening. I think he's almost one of the most boring parts of the movie for me. I think there's just so much else going on in this movie, and the plot itself, I think, is, you know, you need him for the plot, but the way he's killed is, it's a nice revenge kind of thing, and I like the way it ends, but it's fairly it's just fairly uneventful death, I guess. He gets shot in the back, and, you know, that's kind of how he's dispatched. He falls over onto the console or whatever. So it's not your typical villain death. Again, that's a script writing thing. Doesn't have much to do with him. But the overall villain portrayal in the movie, I think there's a lot of him, and it's kind of like, I don't need more of him. There's some good scenes in there, some good dialogue and everything like that. He definitely delivers well. But I just think by the end of the movie, I'm just kind of tired of him. I just get a little sick of it. I think you could have done more with his character. I think you could have, I mean, you know, he's got his eye patch, but that's kind of where the iconography goes into play, where, yeah, that's an iconic thing he has. But does his iconic look make him a better villain than a lot of these other people on the list? Probably not, to me. Um, and with that, we're going to go on to You Only Live Twice. And this Blofeld is very iconic as well. I'm going to put him below Dr. No, but kind of the same lines, with just a great all-around performance. You know, obviously it's iconic. The scar, the reveal, all of that's great. Zero physical threat, though. I mean, he has one of the least menacing villains I've seen in a Bond film. And for me personally, I think, you know, he doesn't have to go toe-to-toe with Bond because he's the leader of the organization. And I think that plays into some later rankings as well. I love how Donald Pleasance plays Blofeld. I think it's my favorite Blofeld. Not to spoil anything, but I definitely think it's just my favorite. You know, he doesn't blink. He's just staring into your soul. But there's some really goofy stuff that happens in here, you know, not just outright killing Bond. I know you can't in the movie, but, you know, he kills Osato and, you know, just then is thwarted when he tries to kill Bond. It's just, I don't know. That whole thing, you're trying to make a very silly situation seem serious, and that doesn't work for me as well. He is somebody who is in the movie, not a ton, but his presence is felt, and same as Dr. No. So I don't want to hold that against either of them. I think the thirst for more, I just have a thirst for more of a lesser degree than Dr. No. Dr. No I want more of. I want more of him. I definitely want more of Goldfinger. You know, the scenes are just great. The chemistry's great. I don't know if it's also the fact that Connery wasn't in top form, but the chemistry just didn't feel right, despite Donald Pleasance acting really well. So, I don't know. For me, sure, one of the most iconic things in the franchise was the Blofeld reveal, but it's just a small part in the overall portrayal of Blofeld. Still the best Blofeld, but I think villain-wise, I think we just get more colorful throughout the franchise, and I like that. You know, it might not be the right, you know, it might not be right, but for me, that's kind of what I like. I like that more colorful portrayal. I like stuff to stand out when it comes to just how they act with the character and the environments around them. I mean, he was just there. You know, he was just doing his thing, and to me, it was, I could have used more, you know. I guess it was his home field advantage, though. We were in his volcano lair, and he had Bond prisoner, but still, I just think, you know, as far as a villain, he does a really good job. It's great, not to take anything away. I just don't think he's perfect, but great all around. Yeah, top tier villain for sure. Definitely, I mean, up there in the top 15 easy, maybe top 10 even. We'll see what happens, but yeah, I think he did a great job. We got Telly Savalas and his Blofeld next from On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and for me, I think it's a good portrayal. I'm going to put him probably, yeah, right above Rosa Klebb. I think as far as, you know, her shortcomings, I think he was kind of the opposite. He was the focal point and the catalyst for this. As far as Blofeld goes, though, the only one that felt very out of his environment in this movie. Now, this movie's a great, like, standalone. On Her Majesty's Secret Service is wonderful. I think it's just one of the best movies in the franchise, and everything kind of works well together. Telly Savalas is great on screen. He's got a great physical presence. He looks the part. He's, you know, just doing everything you would want from a villain. I just feel like his character specifically feels so out of place in the grand scheme. I mean, you look at the portrayal before in You Only Live Twice. He's in a volcano lair with tons of people working for him. You look at the portrayal after. He's in a penthouse, hiding away. His identity's hidden. Everything, you know, he's got people working for him all over the world. And then here you go. You have him just kind of hanging out in his lair with, you know, a few people, a few guards and whatnot. And for me personally, it just doesn't feel as genuine as some of the other Blofeld portrayals or villains in general. It is more grounded in reality, which I like, even though the plot is kind of just outrageous and out there. The interactions are great. I think it's a good portrayal. I just don't think... I feel like if it wasn't supposed to be a Blofeld, it could have been a better portrayal. I don't know. It's hard to say because I really do like what he does, and I really do like him in the movie. I think it's hard for me to just get over the fact that he is supposed to be this major player, this owner, operator of the Spectre organization, and he's just hanging out in the area overseeing whatever's happening, and he lets Bond just get right up in front of him, even though he's disguised as Sir Hilary Bray or whatever. But it just, for me, feels very, very strange that he's so accessible in this movie. And it's probably a script writing thing. It's probably not on Telly himself. Like I say, he does a good job portraying. I think towards the end, though, for me also, what kind of keeps it from going to the great all around is just how loose the character kind of gets. He's just there. The bobsled thing was cool, but it seems very out of character. The part where he's got his broken neck and he's in the car and watches Bond's wife get gunned down and they try to kill Bond in the car, that seems very out of character too. I would think my Blofeld would send people to assassinate, unless what they were going for is maybe, hey, we've tried so many times and we can't get him, let me just be there myself for it, which is completely abandoned in the next two Blofeld portrayals anyway. So I guess there's kind of a little bit of that Christoph Waltz portrayal where they're like, hey, I better just be here to do it myself, or they get kind of toe-to-toe a little bit. It's just, it's not right. Again, spoiler alert, but it's very boring and unbelievable for me. We will go to a very fun Blofeld portrayal, and a movie that I think is, in my opinion, very, as jokey as it is and campy and ridiculous, I think it's fairly underrated. I love Diamonds Are Forever. There's just something about it. It's my guilty pleasure Bond, but I will be honest about this. I think this is ridiculous. I think even getting over the fact that he was an ally in a movie before, or played an ally in a movie before, this Blofeld, it goes back to that traditional, I am the leader of an organization and everybody's working for me, and I'm hard to find, hard to get around, until they have him like dress up and drag and stuff like that, which I don't get. I don't understand why anybody even knew who he was dressed in drag like that. There was a lot of stuff that kind of lost me towards the end there. And I think that for me personally, Charles Gray does a good job of being a fun Blofeld. I think he does a good job too of the more serious moments when he's on the oil rig. I think that's when his performance takes the leap to be a lot better. I think in the beginning, it's not great. It's very wooden, very staged, very staggered performance. I think in the Willard White kind of penthouse place or hotel or wherever they are, I think that is a fun portrayal. I think it's very campy. It's very of the time. I like it, but it's not fantastic for who he's supposed to be. And then you have him on the oil rig and it's more serious. It's more calculated. That feels like when he shines, which is funny because Tiffany Case is the opposite. She kind of degrades throughout the movie and turns into somebody that I don't enjoy watching from somebody I really did enjoy watching. And he turns into somebody I don't enjoy watching to somebody I do enjoy watching at the end. It's very interesting. And I think that's the problem with Diamonds for a lot of people, is not only is it silly, but there's a lot of silly Bond movies. I think that there's just no continuity, no driving force to keep all the characters together. I think it all just falls into this bowl of plot spaghetti, and stuff just kind of comes out, and things change that shouldn't change. Things are added in that shouldn't be added in. It's just a mess, but I like that mess. It's my guilty pleasure mess, So I really do like Gray in general. But to be honest, it just doesn't feel like a Blofeld performance, and it doesn't feel menacing throughout the movie either. I never feel scared or threatened by this guy. I never feel scared or threatened by the plot. Again, probably writing, probably lack of resources, but yeah, I feel bad because I do like him, but it's tough to give him anything higher than this. I mean, really, if I wasn't being very brutally honest with this list and how I, was really feeling, I think a lot of these guys would be up at the top of perfect and great all around, because I love the movies, but I'm trying to isolate like individual pieces. However, I will say, Mr. Big / Kananga, I love him. I love this movie. I love every villain in this movie. I like all the henchmen. I like the organizational feel. I like that he plays two characters, essentially, whether you can tell or not, it's just, I mean, what a marvelous job acting. He plays two completely different characters and plays them both well. It's menacing. It's creepy. I mean, when he's laughing and kind of talking to Bond in his little suave tone and everything, and then he goes toe to toe with him at the end, I think that's very just creepy, very good. I think all around everybody in this movie, for the most part, works very well together. The chemistry is incredible. When he's in New York as Mr. Big, it's so good. It's so fun to watch. And I think that there's got to be something to be said about playing two different characters at the same time. I don't know. I think the script writing was fantastic for this. I think I've always loved Yaphet Kotto as an actor. I like everything he's in. And there's not much I can say about him other than it is a wild ride, and I enjoy it every single time I watch him and just this movie in general. Great debut for Roger Moore. Great all around. Everybody's working together. Very iconic, very fun to watch, and he just does such a good job. He looks the part. He acts the part. I can't help but have a good time watching him and watch this movie. I really do give him props for everything that he's done in this movie. I don't think I can't even name something I don't like. I mean, you know, at the very end when they blow him up, that's the only part that I think kind of throws it for me, because that's ridiculous. But you know, it's the 70s and it's Bond in the 70s, so you can't win them all, essentially. And that wasn't his fault playing it. It was just the props. So whatever. Moving on, I will go with Scaramanga, Man with the Golden Gun. That's going up high as well. I love Christopher Lee and everything as well. I love how he played the role. I love the connection outside of Bond as far as the movies too. The whole franchise and Ian Fleming and everything like that. I think that's cool. I don't love everything they did with him, but that's more of a plot thing with the, you know, the Solex laser agitator thing. And it seemed like they could have done more with his character and done more with him in general in the movie, but every scene he's in is electric. Everything he does is great. He's creepy. He's menacing. He's scary. He gets just a lot of good screen time. It's not just like, okay, he's on screen a while, but what he does on there, there's, you know, the great dinner scene. There's the great, the opening. There's the great, just throughout the movie, the kills are good. It's just so calm and collected with what he does. I think the idea around his character is really cool too. He's just this top assassin that nobody can stop or wants to try to stop. Absolutely love him. And just, you know, there's ridiculous stuff in this movie too. Of course, it's not a great overall movie, but boy, he really made this movie amazing. And I think we can kind of appreciate it more now, because literally, I think it's Roger Moore's worst Bond movie. I think he's having a tough time with direction in that movie. You know, how is he going to play a jokey kind of Bond like the rest of Roger Moore movies? Is he going to take a more hard-edged approach? He does some things in there I don't agree with or like to see. It's very weird. It's a very weird movie, mix of like great and not great, but I think Christopher Lee is just an outstanding character, and, you know, given all the hurdles he had to go through with the writing and the plot and everything like that, he just does such a good job. So, I mean, he's got to be up there. I love watching him. I go back to Man with the Golden Gun mostly just to watch him. I think everything else in that movie is okay and tolerable, but man, anytime Christopher Lee's on screen, it's just fantastic. And we're going to move on to The Spy Who Loved Me and Carl Stromberg. No surprise here, but he is definitely missing something. He's not quite, doesn't work for me. I think he works as, you know, whatever he's supposed to do. But as far as missing something, I think he is one of the weakest villains that still kind of works. I think he has this kind of eerie creepiness to him. You know, he has people working for him. He has a cool base and all this stuff. But the plan just seems outrageous. He doesn't do anything very passionately in the movie. He doesn't ever have these moments of like, I'm losing control, or I'm this crazy guy. I think the plan's crazy, but I don't think he does anything. It just seems like he's there to be there. There's nothing special about his portrayal at all. There's nothing that stands out and makes me think, yes, this guy is incredible. This villain is believable. I'm scared of him. I couldn't care whether he was in the movie or not. In fact, I think the Jaws, all the henchmen, really, everybody in this movie just outshines Stromberg by a mile. I just, Jaws was super creepy in the movie. Jaws was the one that I was very scared of and the menacing threat. When we got to Stromberg, I mean, he was dispatched in 2 seconds. He's got traps and stuff, but outside of that, it seems like I don't need more Carl Stromberg. I don't need any of that stuff. I need a better portrayal, or just take him out altogether and there's more assassins going after Bond and, some kind of plan or whatever. They had to shoehorn that plan into it with the water and the underground society and all that. So it works with you need that catalyst for everything. You need that catalyst for the nuclear annihilation and everything like that. But it needed somebody that was seeming more crazy, more over the top. If they had like a Christopher Walken type character in there, that would be the way to go. That would be what I would feel like. Okay, now I feel like I'm on board with this. This guy seems very smart, very strategic, and it doesn't seem like it just doesn't, I don't know. To me, it just doesn't work. I think that's not a very hot take, though. I don't think a lot of people love Stromberg. But, yeah, for me, it wasn't it. It wasn't working for me. Next, we're going to go, it's hilarious because I think a great all-around is Drax here from Moonraker. But I think exactly the opposite of Stromberg. They're the same essential character. One's in water, one's in space. They're both destroying the world for no reason at all, like whatever. Moonraker, for me, especially nowadays when we do have billionaires blasting off into space, feels more and more realistic every single year. And that's strange and something I never thought I'd say or think about. Drax is a very calm, collected, creepy, eerie guy. He doesn't have a ton of screen time, but the screen time he does have, he makes the most of it. And then when he loses control towards the end, it's very believable, and it's very, okay, this guy's for real. Whereas Stromberg, you're waiting the whole time for that. He dies sitting down. It's like, he's eating dinner. Whereas Drax is fighting. He's up there. He's giving orders. He's losing control. He's losing his mind, essentially. And then he's forced out of his airlock and killed in such a very fitting way for him. So it's just good. It feels good. It feels right. I love the portrayal. I love just how he carries himself throughout the film. The interactions are fantastic. The scenes are so well done and smooth with him in it. It's just everything you want in one of those Bond villains. And he's got a ton of people working around him and for him. That's very believable too. So even though Moonraker is a crazy, outlandish movie, I don't think it has any fault in the villain himself. The space battle's ridiculous. I think that's one of the dumbest scenes in any James Bond movie. But Drax, again, no fault of him or the portrayal of Drax. It's just so smooth, so eerie, so creepy. I love it. I love it. I love The Spy Who Loved Me. I think that's just a very, very good Bond movie. One of my favorites, if not my favorite. If you replaced Stromberg with Drax, I think that would be, one of the best movies of all time. There wouldn't be a weakness with it. Right now, the glaring weakness with Spy Who Loved Me is Stromberg. The glaring weakness with Moonraker is just its believability and how it's so much more cartoony than a lot of the other, not just Roger Moore movies, Bond movies in general. We will move on to For Your Eyes Only and Cristados. And I'll tell you what, this portrayal for me, it just doesn't do it for me. It's definitely missing something. And I I've got to put him low. It's just boring. I mean, he doesn't do anything wrong really, but I think that might be also part of the plot situation is you're not supposed to know who the villain is, what side is who on, and who's working for what and what's going on. I love For Your Eyes Only. I do think it's a very underrated movie. I like the more grounded in reality Bond movies. I wish there was more of a scale to it, though. I wish there was more danger involved in the mission. That, you know, at the end they just destroy the MacGuffin. They're like, okay, yeah, let's just break this plot device, and it means nothing. So you just wipe away everything that happened. The revenge plot, I get, but Bond telling somebody not to get revenge, even though he's gone on revenge several times. I guess not at that point, but, well, actually, yeah, he did, you know, because in Diamonds Are Forever, he went on revenge in the beginning. It was a stupid, real lame revenge thing that they just loosely tied everything up real quick. But it's just weird to and especially because in the beginning of this movie, he's at Tracy's grave. So it really doesn't make any sense that he's against all this revenge stuff. And he's trying to like play this wise sage in the movie. But all that aside, Christados, I don't think Julian Glover was given the best opportunity to play a villain because the subject matter was not great around him. It's hard to play both sides of it, where you're supposed to be framed as a good dude and then a villain. The end, when everything's figured out, he's not really that menacing. I think a lot of the characters kind of blend in. There's not a ton of chemistry between him and anybody else in there. So there's definitely, it's so funny. I like the movie a lot, and then the more I talk about it, I'm like, well, what actually do I like about the movie? I think it's for me, the parts are definitely greater as a whole than they are individually. And yeah, Julian Glover and you know, his portrayal as Christados, it just doesn't do it for me. It's not very interesting. I think I'm more interested in seeing Roger Moore go through this one and the landscapes and everything around it. I think it's cool the way he develops relationships with Melina and everything in there. I think I love Topol in the movie. I think he does a fantastic. He's got the exact opposite. You think he's a villain and then he's good, and I love him in this movie. So that also kind of overshines Christados in this movie, where it's like you have essentially the same role in reverse, but I love his portrayal and don't love the Christados portrayal. So I think that kind of also balances out in that way. Like I said, just a lot of moving pieces that don't really need to be moving. And at the end of the day, I just think there's so much better out there. Still not the worst. We're coming up to that, but as far as these up here, I think they just do so much of a better job. We're going to get to General Orlov now, and for me, I love General Orlov. I think he's a great character. I'm going to put him down at a good portrayal, though. The problem with Octopussy, to me, is that it's a lot happening. There's a lot of strong characters and standout, just people in the movie doing different things. There's too much plot happening all at once that's supposed to weave and intersect, and it doesn't really. This is a very over-the-top kind of cartoony performance, and I love what he does in this movie, but I don't need it as much as I just don't need it in the movie as much as I love watching it. So it is a good portrayal. It is fun to watch him. He's a great actor. He does a great job in this. Burkhoff just does an amazing job with this character. But I think the fact, it could have been two different movies. I think you could have had two different plots going for this movie and broken it off into two. If he was the standout villain, I think it would be a lot higher, but it seems very unnecessary, and especially when you have the buttery smooth Kamal Khan also in this movie. There's a lot of outshadowing, a lot of just covering up this crazy dude. It's like almost a dichotomy of, just this very in control person and then this out of control, just psycho. But I mean, the plot, if you piece it together and follow along, it works eventually, but I think it would have been better as two different movies. I really think that if you had taken the elements of Burkov and that character and moved it to like how the Living Daylights was, that would have made Living Daylights villains better, in my opinion, than what they are, and it would have made Steven Burkov's character a little more important in the overall movie. But yeah, I like the performance a lot. I love watching him on screen. I think just when I sit and analyze it, it's so out of left field and over the top for me that I don't know. I have a fun time watching him, but I don't necessarily need it in the movie, I guess. Still, I mean, I love that it's in the movie, but at the same time, I just, you know, like I say, it seems kind of outrageous, especially given the settings. I mean, he's in this military setting, and you would think in an actual military setting, he wouldn't be allowed to just jump up and parade around this plane and then go do whatever he wants. So I don't know. I mean, I know it's James Bond. I know you got to kind of go with some of this stuff, but when you really stop and think about it, I think it was very good and mostly a plot kind of thing letting him down, but I do love him. I love his character. It's just hard for me to put him higher than anybody else or up higher. However, I will say Khan. I'm going to put Khan probably up here. I don't think I like him better than Dr. No, but I do like Khan because... Yeah, I do. I think I like Khan because he's very believable in the role. I think he's very silky smooth. I think the plot needs to have him. If he wasn't there, there's a lot of emotions and things you can see on his face from earlier on when he's kind of scared of the organization that he's working for and working with. He's more just kind of a fall in line character that progressively over time just seizes more and more and more. The scenes that he has with Bond or with anybody he's interacting with are just so cool, so creepy, so just great. I really like his character. I just cannot take my eyes off of him and the scene and the surroundings and the subtleties. Now, this is where the subtleties really come into play. The eye movements, when he gets a little cocky and confident and he's just kind of like loosely giving orders. When he gets more intense throughout the movie, I just think he plays those shifts so well. It's not a one-note kind of guy. He has all kinds of different notes that he plays on, and I love it. Love everything about him. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of disagreement about that, especially above some of these other... Like, with Drax, for instance, I don't think Drax does a ton of range. I think he's just this very mild-mannered, creepy person, and then he explodes at the end. Same with Blofeld. I think the reveal is iconic, and he plays it really well, but it's one note throughout most of the movie, whereas Khan, I think he just goes through so many different phases. And then when he's even working with Orlov and he sees the real egg get smashed, just the facial expression that goes along with it is so good. I don't even care that the scene to me doesn't make a ton of sense, and nothing about that really... I don't really get it. I mean, I understand it works somehow with the plot and everything like that, and it furthers the story along, and they have to meet up, and that way you can get more into the story. But I don't know. He does such a good job of all of these different emotions, and the chemistry throughout the whole movie is so good. I love him. He's always been one of those soft spots, and definitely boosts that movie. I love that movie. I think it gets a bad rap, but I really think he does a great job of making it. I really think there's a lot of strong players in that movie in general. And I think it would have been better. It has two separate movies versus one. But, that's just... We'll get into that another day. We got Max Zorin. And to me, this guy is just fantastic. I absolutely love him. I think for me, he's probably got to be top 3. Talk about just a psychotic, crazy villain. He works so well with the Bond. He works so well with the times, too. Those 80s Bond movies where they're just over the top. I think the movie itself, View to a Kill, is one of my least favorites. But, boy, Walken just does such a good job of making it very watchable, very tolerable. He is so out of his mind, and it's some of the craziest scenes of any of the Bond movies. I think they do a really good job casting him, and he does a good job of taking that role and showing that he can be a major player in the movie, get his hands dirty in the mines and stuff like that, have that combat where you believe it, but then also run that organization so smoothly. So a lot of different notes with him as well. I think unanimously feels like one of the best villains kind of in the franchise, and I just wish he was in a movie that they really could have done more with him as far as the interacting, and it's just a better movie in general, more watchable movie. I think the rest of the movie kind of falls flat with the plot and with some of the characters in there, and just it's still ridiculous. It's still very campy, but he plays that role very well. He probably does the best overall campy kind of villain, but it seems just cartoony enough to be wild and fun, but also very scary, creepy, and believable. I absolutely love him in this movie, and he does such a fantastic job. But yeah, I mean, that's about all I can say about View to a Kill and in a positive light. Not a fan of it, and I basically watch For Walken, which says a lot, and I don't get tired of his character throughout either. I think he has a ton of screen time, but it's all used so well. Next, we're going to go to Living Daylights, and in my opinion, some of the weakest villains you could ever have, and both of them do not work for me. Koskov can go at the very back here, and Whitaker a little higher, but I don't love the acting. I don't love Whitaker in that role. I don't find it very real or believable. He's supposed to be some crazy general, and he's very full of himself and has, all the statues of him and everything like that. And Koskov's a traitor, and I don't know. It's a lot of stuff that's supposed to be riveting plot that just gets kind of lost, and I don't know what's happening through most of the movie. I think it's some of the most boring villains and henchmen and everything in this movie, and it sucks because I love Dalton in this movie, and I enjoy the scenery. I enjoy a lot of the flow. I think they do a very good job of introducing Dalton. There's definitely some great moments in this movie, and none are in part to the villains. I just do not love either of these guys. I think Whitaker for me is just so boring. I think his just he's always talking the same way throughout the movie. It's not monotone or anything. It just feels like you're Jack Wade aside, later on when he plays Jack Wade. Like, I like him as that character, but still kind of he just talks. He's just there to talk. There's no real, you could have cast anybody in that role, essentially, to just talk and further the plot along. And for me, Whitaker's kind of that guy. Koskov, I think he's great acting. I don't love the character. I don't love how over the top he is. He kind of overshadows Whitaker, but is less important in the role. And then I think it's just so out of place. I think that portrayal's just kind of out of place. He's supposed to be like this double-crossing guy, but he's just very out there and, this sniveling kind of character that I just do not believe or want to see in this movie at all. I don't like his role. And I think there are some great scenes with the characters in general, except for these two. I think for the most part, I was going to think, I'm just looking back at this movie and thinking okay, so the henchmen have some pretty significant roles. There's a few different things that happen there that further the plot. The MI6 guys all have pretty significant roles and great interaction and stuff like that. Bond, of course, in the beginning, great introduction, great chemistry with the main Bond girl and everything like that. Everybody just seems to work together very well, except for these two guys. And I hate the final battle. I think it's ridiculous. I don't know what kind of shield gun he's using. I don't know. Maybe I'm way off on this one, but for me, these guys just do not fit the villain archetype. And especially given the movie before and the movie after, where the villains are so freaking strong. We're going to get right to it now with Sanchez. I'm going to put him up here in License to Kill right after Christopher Lee. This guy is just so believable, so grounded in reality, so much depth of character too, which you don't usually get from the villains. Usually you get like, okay, they're crazy villains, this and that. But this guy, loyalty is his like big deal. He's so loyal to his organization, and the people are like family to him. And that's what I love about License to Kill. The whole like infiltrating the organization and planting the seeds of deceit and like double crossing in his mind. And it just kind of eats away at him. He's so ruthless. He's just so calculated. Some brutal scenes. And, you know, a lot of people don't love the fact that there's so many brutal scenes in this. They don't love the fact of how dark it is. But I think it works pretty well. I think the movie itself is kind of just... It just doesn't look very Bond. It's not a very good looking movie. It's not a very stylish movie. It's not a suave movie. It's a revenge story. So in my opinion, it doesn't need to be. But then they shoehorn it in so many things, like the ninja scene, and they have this weird, convoluted kind of like love triangle story going on too. Couple that with the plot device of the missiles and everything like that. It's just so much unnecessary in this movie to kind of market it and make it more palatable as a James Bond movie, and it really didn't have to be. But through all that chaos and all that mess, you have this standout villain, this diamond in the rough, who just lifts this movie up. I think Timothy Dalton does a great job, and I think Davi does a great job, and they just play off each other so well. The characters save this film. Overall, the film, to me, is just not a very good-looking film. The plot makes sense, but they also put a lot more on the plot at the end than needs to be. There's a little bit of, you know, goofy stuff that just really doesn't work. And I think that has to do more with Dalton's strong suit in more of a hard-edged kind of James Bond. And then I think that also has to do with more of the tone is so dark. It's hard to put one-liners and campy stuff in there that they were trying to force in there. But it doesn't affect Sanchez. He's just got the look. He's got the act. He's got the depth. He loses control towards the end, but it seems very believable. He's just kind of over it at that point and wants to just take care of everything himself. The full circle moment where the lighter comes into play at the end is great. Like I said, a lot of that is plot, and it doesn't have to do with the portrayal, but I think the way he just kind of fits himself into every situation so well and almost steals the show. He's got to be up there for me. The only thing that keeps him from being the higher tier Bond villain for me is the fact that it just doesn't feel like... It doesn't feel like, to me, he is a Bond villain per se, just because of the subject matter of the movie. I think overall for me, it's just like, look at who you got. You got an assassin at the top. You've got Mr. Big and Kananga, who is, you know, this 2-for-1 cartoony villain, but just plays it so well. Max Zorin is just over the top, crazy, destroy the world kind of guy. And you have this drug kingpin where it's, like I say, it's more grounded in reality, but it's just, it didn't sit right that he has these missiles and all this other stuff too. So I just feel like that was kind of letting him down more than he lets the role down. But overall, just a fantastic villain, and I love watching him. I can't put him any lower than that, obviously. He's just so good. Next we have 006, Alec Trevelyan. And for me, I absolutely love this guy. He is going at the number 2 spot. It is another portrayal of a guy who is Bond's equal, but he's kind of leading an organization, kind of has this grand master plan. To me, it works pretty well. I love the movie. I love the plot. I think there's definitely a lot of just go with it in this, but there's a lot of just go with it in most Bonds, so I kind of look past it. The characters all throughout are so good. This is why I love 006. I think it's cool that he is a 00 agent. I think the idea of him potentially even being James Bond in general was really cool, that he could have played that role and we would have been fine with it. So you have this really believable character, this really like physically threatening character. He plays it so smooth. I love the subtleties of the movements. His Sean Bean, I mean, what a great actor. And then the fact that there's also so much strength in the henchmen and supporting villains. Everybody in this movie is so good, so memorable. Oramov, Onatop, Boris even, like all of them are so just outlandish, and they all have their quirks, and they're all so great at acting and work so well in this movie. He doesn't get overshined by them, though, in my opinion. I think he is right there with them, but a little more menacing, a little more fearful when you watch him and you see him and you think, wow, this guy, like this, I could see it going either way in that final fight. It's not one of those final fights where they have to make him look like he's losing and then he comes back. Like, you really do believe that he's beating Bond. But it's just, I mean, so good. Such an iconic portrayal as well. For a later stage movie, too, to have that kind of iconic reveal and just how good GoldenEye was, I think overall he's just such a good character, and I have so much fun watching him. I think the fact that he is not super over the top and cartoony, but also such a menacing villain, it plays in so well with what he does. And I think it's probably one of my favorite Bond equal kind of moments. I mean, I know we've done like Scaramanga was supposed to be, and Red Grant was supposed to be, and I think Silva was supposed to be another equal to him, and I think Alex Trevelyan is the equal of all equals. I think he really does play the part very well, and the character itself is designed so well. Now, there's, like I say, the plot lets him down a little bit, where it's like, oh, just go with this. How did he survive? How is this? How did he get here? Why has he got all this stuff going on? So I think there's definitely that kind of holding him back just a tiny bit, but that's more of a plot thing than a character thing. Next, we will go into Tomorrow Never Dies. And we have Elliot Carver. Now, Elliot Carver, for me, is a more grounded in reality, and I believe a little more believable than some back in the day would have imagined. I think it was kind of harder to believe until social media became a thing. And now everybody thinks there's a bunch of Elliot Carvers all over the world doing exactly what he was doing. So I think as time goes on, this character becomes more believable. I just think he wasn't very exciting. I do think that there were moments where you could see his craziness and you could see, oh yeah, this guy's outrageous. But I do think there was just a couple of very cartoony, unnecessary character breaking things with this movie, and just some of the scenes where it just seems like a child almost. I don't love that. I don't like that. It's kind of missing that hard edge throughout. I think if he played it more like Drax, more like this character was the whole time, and then kind of lost it towards the end, that to me feels very much more, okay, that's believable for the character of his status. I mean, he's, these balls, and he's a host of a media corporation, everything like that. And to see him kind of acting like a fool, it just doesn't feel as, I just don't like to see that. I like to see these guys be more of a menace than more of a joke. And I think in some areas he was definitely a joke. Now, there were definitely times when he felt a little more scary or in control, but there was never really a physical threat with him. There was a very like twirl your mustache cartoon villain aspect to him that sometimes worked but usually didn't for me. I think overall a good portrayal, but not quite on that level of good portrayal that all these others are. I think there's a clear level of difference between these guys and then everything below. I feel like these guys definitely take all around a great approach and beyond, and I think the subject matter and the charisma of the character, as well as how they interact with everybody in the movie, just sets them apart from these guys. I think they do stuff well, but not everything well. That's why it's missing something. Like, there's definitely great elements, but not overall amazing elements for me. We're going to take a little bit of a different route, and this may shock some people. This may may shock some people. I'm not sure. We'll see what happens. But I like Electra King a lot. I like the way her character is played, and I like the way they involve her in the plot. I think that is such a unique way to spin a villain, where it's someone Bond can't resist. It's a very different thing we've seen. I'm going to put her above these characters only because of the uniqueness of the character and how well she plays it. The fact that she also, this is a behind the scene thing, but just the English was not, she had to essentially like learn better English to play this character, and does such a good job with it. I thought that was just mind blowing, the level of dedication, and you can tell just the way she plays. She's such a good actress, and the first time you see this movie too, like take out all the other times, you know what's going to happen, you know who the bad guys are. Remember the first time you saw this movie and how maybe some people could go with it. For me personally, when I was watching this, I was like, oh my God, I hope she gets saved. I hope they end up together at the end. And then the fact that she ended up being the main like mastermind behind all of the stuff that was going on, the Stockholm Syndrome, the everything, the manipulation, it's just such an emotional roller coaster, and she just brings that to life. I don't think you could have done that with anybody else, really. There's nobody else that I think could have played this role so well. I think she makes Tomorrow Never Dies a much better movie. I love, obviously, Pierce Brosnan does a great job. He looks super comfortable and super slick in the movie. But I think she is just so good at manipulating him and taking us on this ride. There's a lot of great in this movie. I do think if you watch this movie enough and you're like, okay, I've seen Electra King, I understand that she is the villain, and you kind of lose that roller coaster of emotion factor. But I do think still she just does such a good job of capturing the scenes and taking over that, I mean, she definitely deserves to be higher up on this list, in my opinion. Like I said, I know people might disagree with that. A lot of people don't love this movie. I love a lot of these movies, so it probably doesn't rank super high for me, but it's still a great movie that I love. And it's just a matter of so many good things versus, oh, these are actually bad. And her portrayal, I think, is one of those standout things that just absolutely blows away a lot of the other characters in here. And like I say, I don't think the movie would work at all it definitely wouldn't. I mean, the plot revolves around her, so I know the movie itself wouldn't work without her, but I think if she didn't have just that perfect of a villain portrayal, that role, that manipulation, that believability, there's so many great scenes where you just kind of feel for her, and then you go, oh my God, she played us all. So I think for me personally, that kind of ranks her a little higher there. We're going to go on to one of my least favorite movies, not surprising at all, but Die Another Day, and I am going to put our boy Gustav Graves down here. There's a couple of things that kind of hold him back for me. I think he is just... The whole movie, I think there's a lot of callbacks in the movie. I think it's more of a fanfare-y kind of movie with its own plot technically, but there's just a lot going on. And for me, something that I've always not loved about Die Another Day is how the first part of the movie is really cool and really interesting, and then it just devolves into madness towards the end, in my opinion. Graves is just a cartoony as a cartoony villain can be. I cannot stand that end fight. There's just so much stuff shoehorned in that's supposed to be really fun and really artsy and everything like that, where, he's got his head by the bust and all this other stuff of like who he used to be and his dad's there, and just all kinds of stuff that's supposed to be really emotional, but it's just so cringy, so cheesy. It's, again, taking my bias about not liking the movie out, I think that the villains in the beginning do a very good job of feeling menacing, real, and threatening. And then he just does not do anything for me. I mean, great actor in real life, but God, the Die Another Day, there's so much letting him down, and he lets the actual portrayal down, and it's just, he's laughing while he's on the plane that's like crashing. but it doesn't work with, like, when Max Zorn laughs, you think this guy's genuinely insane. When Gustav Graves laughs, you think it's like, oh, okay, I'm supposed to believe he's crazy, but I don't feel it. The whole movie, though, like I say, it's hard to really roll with it for me personally. It's just not my kind of thing. I don't mind a ridiculous, over the top movie. Take Diamonds Are Forever, low budget effects, just a real mess and a real joke the whole time. But even that, I just think Diamonds Are Forever is a more polished version of that movie, or Die Another Day is a more polished version of Diamonds Are Forever. So not a lot works for me with the portrayal. Not a lot works for me with the movie. And I think Brosnan does a great job, but he alone cannot carry this movie. And unfortunately, he's giving it his all. But even some of those scenes are a little ridiculous, despite him being an amazing Bond and an amazing actor, in my opinion. But I still think he's better than these guys. I really hate the villains in Living Daylights, but I still think he is just barely better than them. I think there's a little personality, a little flair. There's a couple of good scenes here and there, but for me, it just doesn't do it. Never did, never will. I'm going to move on to Le Chiffre, and I'll tell you what, this guy is top tier. One of the best villains overall. Le Chiffre is so just convincing as a human, as a person, as a villain. You can see his panic and desperation, which is something that sets him apart from most villains, is you really do believe he is losing control and he'll do anything to try to gain that control back. His interactions, his chemistry, his menace, he can take a card game and turn it into something intense. Casino Royale is one of the best movies I've seen in general, let alone Bond film. And for me personally, this is a huge reason why he is just so good in this movie and so believable and so creepy. You can see him in control. You can see different moods. You can see him lose control. You can see him winning, losing, panic. Just everything about him is so good, and it's so multidimensional. I love what he does in this movie. He's a joy to watch. The whole movie is just such a great... I mean, you got to give it to everybody who worked on that movie. They really made that comeback strong. They really did a good job of rebooting the franchise. I think it's gone up and down since then, but boy, Casino Royale just absolutely takes it to another level. And I quite enjoy watching everything, every scene, every nuance, every little look, every little twitch, everything that Le Chiffre does. He's just so good. Just so good. We're going to move on to Quantum, though, which is kind of the exact opposite. Dominic Green for me. I am actually going to put him a little higher. I think the plot does more at letting him down than anything. I don't love him in this movie. I think as far as missing something goes, I think the movie itself just... It's also kind of suffers from a few of these other Bond movies where I feel like there's multiple movies. It's the shortest movie, but I feel like there's multiple movies within Quantum of Solace. And they wrap up the water thing, the revenge thing, the becoming Bond thing, all at different points and all kind of just leave you wanting more. You know, you find a conclusion to stories that we didn't know even were getting going. Dominic Green doesn't feel very menacing, doesn't feel like a strong villain, doesn't feel... He's got a little more personality, though, than these guys. I mean, these guys are like watching wallpaper. I mean, it just doesn't do anything for me. And then you got the opposite here, where there's tons of personality here, but they just feel so over the top. He's kind of right in between, where I just don't think... He literally is the definition of missing something for me. He doesn't have that Bond villain feel at all. He doesn't have that menace. He doesn't have that... that organization thing. He doesn't have anything really going for him, and I'm not invested in his journey or his role. So for me personally, he just kind of fits in there. I don't hate him. I think he's necessary for the story, and he does a good job of what he's given, but the movie itself just feels kind of like a more of a letdown, especially after Casino Royale and, before Skyfall. But that's really all I have to say about Dominic Green, and that's kind of more of a testament of why he is where he is. Next, we're going to go to Skyfall, and we have Silva. I will put him right up here, right behind Dr. No, and right above Elektra. I think his character, the idea of him is great. I think he is a very cartoony kind of villain, but also kind of a Bond equal. I don't think he does it as well as other characters do. I think the acting in this is fantastic. I love the character. I love everything about him. I love the acting. I love the chemistry. I think where he gets let down is how much you just kind of have to go with for him to be where he is and who he is. You have to just, I mean, from the moment the movie starts, the moment the movie ends, it's just one of those like, okay, I'll go with this. I'll go with that. Yeah, I see that. Maybe I believe it. Okay, I'll go with this. And like, you know, again, there's a lot of stuff in Bond that you have to just kind of go with. But for me, this movie's fantastic. It's fun to watch. I love all the characters in it. I love everything about this movie. But it is one of those where I'm just constantly going, okay, yeah, go with it, go with it, go with it. They do that again in Die Another Day, or No Time to Die, sorry. Die Another Day, yeah, really. Actually, I guess both of them. But definitely in No Time to Die, where nothing really makes any sense to me in that movie. This movie, it all makes sense, but it has to just be like the most coincidental, incredible timing, well-planned, well-thought out. To me, Silva's excellent. I don't have him up in the perfect villain thing because there are a couple of things, like I say, that let me down with mostly just the writing around him. I just feel like he changes from, okay, I want this revenge. I want to go after this person and assassinate them. I believe that he just wants to, well, of course, he just wants to kind of die, but he wants to take out people with him. Then there are parts in the movie where I don't feel that anymore. I feel like there's a lot more going on. He almost feels like a Joker kind of character. And to me, it feels more like a Joker character than it feels like somebody emulating a unique Bond portrayal. I think these guys are more grounded in reality than he is. I think Dr. No, for me, I love that menace. I love that setup, that build up. What I love about Dr. No personally, and this is something that kind of transcends just the movie Dr. No, is that he is a shadowy, behind the scenes figure, and you feel that. You're scared. You want to know what's going on. You meet him. He's just this creepy, eerie kind of guy that feels like he has control over everything. Setting up the Spectre organization to be this grander, even bigger, ominous shadow for the next few movies. So, like, this sets up a larger scale villain organization, and it's so necessary, not just in Dr. No, but in several other movies coming up. So I give him a lot of credit for just playing that role and making it believable. And the thing is, I love Silva. I wanted to put him in the perfect villain, but I think whenever I see him, I think, okay, I love the acting and I love watching everything on screen, but as far as the overall villain himself, it just doesn't make as much sense to me as some of these other guys do. You know, not to the point where I'd have to put him lower, but there's just stuff that kind of sticks out to me that doesn't really go well together in the overall theme. And plus, I mean, I guess if you're thinking about it, since it is technically a whole reboot and arc for Craig and everything like that, you have to figure that none of this other stuff, even like 006 doesn't factor into this, and he's kind of the newer version of 006. I just think that was better. I just like it better. I enjoy it more. I probably, like I say, you know, a lot of people probably love this portrayal and everything like that, and that's fine. But for me personally, it's just not there. I'm going to be honest about it. We're going to come down to the weakest Blofeld, in my opinion, and I'm going to put him. So probably at the very top of does not work for me, because I don't hate him. But I think they just wrote this Blofeld as just so... Well, I mean, Spectre itself is a mess. The best thing about Spectre is Hanks, just by far. I love the henchman is back in this arc, and, you know, it's menacing. He does a really good job. Very much overshadows this Blofeld. This Blofeld, I was saying earlier, he tries to kind of go toe-to-toe with Bond and match him, and just feels out of the element. It feels like this guy's pulling strings That whole plot device is forced and just doesn't work. I like the actor. I don't like what they give him. And the other big nail in the coffin is I love him and his scenes, which aren't many, but the scenes he has in No Time to Die. I think it's the exact opposite there. I think he plays the character very well, very smooth. He's got a lot more to go on, which is funny because No Time to Die for me, I don't love that movie, but I do love what the characters do in that movie. I think the acting is way better than Spectre. Just very boring. I mean, this Blofeld just does not do it for me. He goes from having himself around this organization to that final like Blofeld confrontation that we've all been hoping for and waiting for. And, you know, we never had it really paid off. The Fear Eyes Only jokey Blofeld thing was awful. The Diamonds Are Forever Blofeld confrontation was a complete mess. I don't know what that was even supposed to be. You know, the mini sub just crashes into a wall and all of a sudden that's the last you see of Blofeld. It's like, okay, great. There's never been a payoff where you feel satisfied with the end of Blofeld. And I think that has to do with the fact that you want to use him more. You want to use Spectre more. You want that organization to keep being that overshadowing kind of thing. And in this, it just doesn't. It all kind of falls apart at the end. They tie off a lot of loose ends for no reason at all. And, you know, the brother thing was just gross. No fault to his. Of course, he didn't write that, but God, that was just so gross and so weird that they had to do that. Anyway, off topic. It just bores me. I'm not a fan of his portrayal, and I think just so many other characters in that movie outshine him by a mile. Still, I like that he's fairly more real than this guy, and these guys just fade into the background for me, so it is what it is. And we're going to move on to the last one, and that is Safin, who I am going to put above these two because, again, these guys just do absolutely nothing for me. But Safin is just hard to watch. I can't even understand what he's saying half the time. He's just mumbling throughout. I hate that he was the one to finally start putting the nails in James Bond's coffin. I don't understand the motivation. I don't understand what's even happening in this movie for him to want to do what he's doing. I don't know how he has all of these people on his payroll. I don't know what he has to do with nanobots. That's all plot stuff, of course, and that all kind of feeds into why his character feels so out of place for me, because nothing works in this movie for me. I like the movie as a movie, but it doesn't make any sense. There's so much you just have to go with on this. Why is anything happening the way it is? Why is he obsessed with Madeline? Why is he trying to adopt the daughter is what it made me feel like her. I don't know. Why was he taking care of her? Why does he have a farm of people working on this island? Who's he selling this stuff to? Why does he want to, like, just so much. And the whole time you just get this monotone, this fake, creepy kind of, like, I never feel creeped out by this guy ever, but he's doing that voice the whole time where you think, oh, he's trying to portray this really eerie, scary, menacing figure, but it feels ridiculous. It feels like he's a great actor. I mean, he's a very, very good actor, and I just don't know how they were able to settle on this line delivery. I don't understand. I mean, just mumbling everything through the whole movie, and it just, to me, felt like I really, end on a low note. But I really am not a huge fan of that. The only reason he's above these guys, like I say, is because they just feel like nobodies in the movie to me. I really don't enjoy their characters at all. I mean, Gustav Graves is a very, very cartoony villain, but at least he's fitting the mold of, hey, we want a ridiculous movie and we want a ridiculous villain. We got it. This was supposed to be very serious, very, a very emotional movie, and to me it just falls flat on all of that. And again, a lot of that's got to be with the writing, but I feel like despite all that writing, Daniel Craig does a fantastic job. I think all of the other characters that are around him do a fantastic job, even better than if they had appeared in movies before. I mean, Madeline was portrayed way better in this movie than the movie previous, but I still don't love her in this. It's just, I think there's so much to love about the acting that he is just so overshadowed by everything. And even, like I say, the Blofeld portrayal, even in the small scenes you get with him, I'm more invested in what he's got to say than anything Safin has to say. I couldn't care less about this guy in the movie. It doesn't work for me. And I know that's probably critical and hard, and maybe you guys have different opinions on it, which brings me to the end of the video. We have our ranking. This is kind of like a 1 through 27 as well. I definitely believe, like, we have the 1 through 7 up here, and then down here it's going to be like, everybody else, the 8 through whatever, this is 13 or something. But yeah, so I think left to right we start it, but this is my overall ranking. I like I say, I love these movies. I love almost all the villains in general, but there are definitely some clear standouts. And please tell me who you like more, who you don't like, what I got wrong, what I got right. It's all subjective, and I respect and appreciate all your opinions because these movies affect us in different ways. We might respond to them in different ways. But one thing that I can say for sure is that we are united in the fact that we love this franchise, and I appreciate every single one of y'all for hanging out, for talking to me, and just allowing me to share my opinion on something that we all love. So thank you so much, and I will see you in the next one.